Why would you bring old covenant items into the new covenant? Isn't Christ the fulfillment of all these?
For the same reason, a 50-year amortized loan costs more in terms of interest than a 30-year amortized loan, because the new covenant is just an extension of the old. Now, the Torah does not prohibit first cousin marriages, but by your logic, if it is indeed done away with, then all endogamous forms of marriage would be permitted. That means that there could be incest left and right. Now, of course, even though first cousin marriages aren't spoken about in Torah, there are still cultural and genetic concerns surrounding it, so people don't engage in it. See, here's the problem. You don't really understand Hebrews, because you'll read Hebrews 8 verse 7, where it says, if there had been nothing wrong with that first covenant, no place would have been sought for another. Stop there, and you're like, oh, see? There was something severely wrong with the Torah. But in the next verse, the writer, who is probably not Paul, says, but God found fault with the people and said. So he did away with the first covenant because the people transgressed it, not because he gave something faulty as an imperfect God. Then the writer of Hebrews goes on to state that God is going to establish a new covenant with the people of Israel, and that he'll put his law in their minds and write them on their hearts. So you're going to say, well, I'm not Israel, but then you're going to say that the new covenant means the law is abolished, even though the new covenant only pertains to Israel. Now, brother, tell me how that logically makes sense, but that is Protestant theology for you. Not only that, but it says, no longer will they teach their neighbor or say to one another, know the Lord. Why? Because the only way you can know the Lord is by doing his commandments. And since they will have the laws written on their hearts, there's no need to say, look, you got to know who God is. You got to understand him relationally. Then it says in verse 13, by calling this covenant new, he has made the first one obsolete, and what is obsolete and outdated will soon disappear. And then you'll go ahead and say that paleo in Greek means that the Torah itself is outdated, and the Torah is the thing that is worn out or that is waxing old. No, that's not what that means, because the writer of Hebrews just told you that the new covenant is going to have the same print as the old covenant, but with better promises. Now, I will grant you that God is allowing the old contract to burn, and he's presenting a new contract before his people. Fine. But let's establish what that means in practical terms. You could have a soccer player playing for FC Barcelona, and they're making 300,000 quid a week. And then he's offered a contract extension, and the contract extension says he will continue to get paid 300,000 quid a week. Now, that means that the old contract can go into the bin, but does that mean that they stop paying him 300,000 quid a week? That's what Protestant theology would suggest. Now, in the Old and New Covenant, in the Old and New Testaments, there is no organization or institution separate from Israel that is given a covenant or promises. Could you show me one verse that would suggest so? Now, let me relax a little here as I jump to Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 26, which says, if we deliberately keep on sinning after we have received the knowledge of the truth, no sacrifice for sins is left, but only a fearful expectation of judgment and of raging fire that will consume the enemies of God. Who are the enemies of God? It says in verse 28, anyone who rejected the law of Moses died without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. It literally says verbatim in Hebrews that the enemies of God are those who violated the law of Moses. Verse 29. How much more severely do you think someone deserves to be punished who has trampled the Son of God underfoot, who has treated as an unholy thing the blood of the covenant that sanctified them, and who has insulted the Spirit of grace? That is talking about you, my brother. For we know him, verse 30, who said, it is mine to avenge, I will repay. And again, the Lord will judge his people. It is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Verse 32, remember those earlier days after you had received the light, when you endured in a great conflict full of suffering. Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution. At other times you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You suffered along with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property, because you knew that you yourselves had better and lasting possessions. So do not throw away your confidence, it will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith, and I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. But we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith or faithfulness and are saved. And the reason why that reads as faithfulness, even though you claim that there's really no need for faithfulness, is because in Habakkuk 2:4, it says that the righteous one will live by emunah. Emunah refers to fidelity to the law or to the Torah. So the Hebrews writer is saying that essentially you need to endure in faithfulness to the Torah, and that if you hold back or pull back, you won't be able to participate in the promises to come. And also that if you continuously violate that Torah, that you have now become an enemy of God. That is just the summary. So basically, God does not like those who reject him out of cowardice or just out of a spirit of disobedience. See, here's the problem with people. They trust in epistemic authority, meaning in the Roman Catholic Church or in their Protestant pastor or in the authority of the rabbis and the sages, that their sources are somehow stable and reliable. But when it comes to the Torah of God, there are a lot of congregations that view it as a diaphoric, meaning it doesn't matter either way. You can keep it if you're a Jew, you don't have to keep it if you're a Gentile. And brother, I'm sorry that Hebrew roots people will tell you that Paul is an illegitimate apostle, or they'll twist his words and the words of Tanakh to make an intellectually dishonest point about their faith and in order to advance their polemics. So I want to basically extend an invitation to you to have an intellectually honest discussion. We don't have to call it a debate, but it can be a civil, peaceful, intellectually honest discussion. Let me know what you think.